Hey guys, how are all of you doing? Hope fine, and yes, this is the next part of Game of Shadow in Naruto world. Where I am in the Naruto world. I have a name that isn't mine and I have a really nerfed version of the gamer. Is that all? Am I forgetting something? Right, inventory. At that I received yet another disappointment. Let's start without any delay. A few days passed after our encounter with the now former wielders of 2 of the 7 swords. Anko had gone on a hunt for the remaining members of the mercenary group, both for some revenge and for information. New Ibari and Shibuki had both been sealed inside scrolls and were both being guarded by me. I had the one duty in case of attack, to run, as far and as fast as possible. Simple and easy. I liked that, especially right that moment. I didn't actually feel that much different from before. And that's what kept me in a daze, really. I didn't know what to think about myself when I had just killed a bunch of people and wasn't even feeling anything in particular for it. Was it wrong of me to feel guilty because I didn't feel guilty? Was it weird? Those questions kept me up those nights. I had tried all I could. Thinking it over, meditating, seeing it from outside perspective. Nothing helped, really. I wished I could be back home, with the dogs in the vet, as it had become normal with me when I wasn't doing so well. But alas, I was in this distant town, by myself with the weapons I had used to kill all those people hidden in the pouch on my hip. I sighed, looking down at my arm, now covered in white bandages instead of the red ones I was used to. This was actually for medical purposes now, instead of just aesthetic ones. According to Anko, the cuts done by New Ibari's thread were bad enough to leave scars, contrary to the cut I had gotten on my cheek. I didn't know what to think about a permanent scar, let alone one such as this one. It would leave lines all over my right forearm forever. Still in a funk, eh, kiddo? Anko asked, appearing out of nowhere right beside me on the tree and looking at nothing in particular. You could say that I admitted easily. There was no point in saying that I was fine. Everyone always noticed those lies. Want to talk about it? She asked, and I appreciated her not beating around the bush. What would dancing around the issue do for anyone? In the end, the problem would still be there. Or you could visit a Yamanaka once we go back, if you prefer, she offered, but I quickly shook my head. No offense to them, or those who use their services, but I think I prefer talking about this with someone I know, I said, my eyes still roaming idly through the landscape in front of us. Next to me, I heard Anko humming noncommittally. Between you and me, I haven't ever visited a Yamanaka either, she said, a hint of a smile in her voice. And I'm sure they are thankful. Nobody would want to be in your head, I responded, although there was no hint of humor on my face. She hit my shoulder without any real force in it. Am I a monster? I asked then, as subtle as a sledgehammer. Definitely, she replied instantly and without a doubt. I internally grimaced at that. No normal person gets as strong as you as fast as you did, IG. Even prodigies, those appear right away, but you appeared in your last 2 years at the academy. That's definitely not what I would call normal. I felt a knot on my throat, that I hadn't even noticed I had. Loosen a bit. And your mind is scary too, not gonna lie, she continued with a matter-of-fact voice. But you are not a bad person, IG, if that's what you mean. I didn't say anything. And that seemed to tell her enough. You are not. Her firm voice softened to levels I had not heard before. Anyone can tell that, IG. You aren't a bad person. And whoever says otherwise hasn't seen you with your friends or in the Inuzuka vet. It doesn't feel like that. Everyone deals with kills differently. That you deal with it this way isn't bad. I'm not dealing with it. My voice raised the smallest bit before I slumped. There's nothing to deal with, nothing at all. Exactly, I blinked dumbly at that. Your brain pushed all emotions out, IG. You've barely shown anything in your face since then. I would know, I've been trained to see these things. I don't know. I stuttered out, unsure what to say to that. Maybe you are doing it unconsciously, but you are doing it, she continued, apparently ignoring my breaking down. But I'm not particularly worried about you, kiddo, she said, a small smile forming on her face. You are a special kind of person, IG. You've adapted to everything this world has thrown at you and came out better than you were. This is just another step forward for you. I went completely still as my brain processed her words. You've adapted to everything this world has thrown at you. I blinked and turned around, staring forwards again. My breathing evened. A coldness that I hadn't even realized was there seemed to lift a bit from my mind, and my thoughts, previously accusing and angry, seemed to grow calmer. This world. When had I stopped thinking about this world as another one? Because whenever that happened, I had grown delusional. This wasn't my world, despite how at home I felt. And I had been trying to apply logic from my world in this one. Of course I thought that working for Danza was horrible of me. Of course I felt terrible about it. He was an absolute monster by my world's standards. And maybe he was one in this world too. But the point was, I wasn't, at least not yet. And killing. I was aware that it was part of this world. But, now, I knew. I had experienced it. And I didn't know what to think about it. What do you think? About what I did? I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have to kill them. Any of them. I could have used stunning thread and knocked all of them out, but I didn't, I admitted, grimacing slightly and intently, not looking at her. I was just the things he said. They weren't good people, she said, not quite answering my question. Maybe they would have ended up in a prison, maybe they would have been killed regardless. But the point is, they weren't good. Most people would tell you that if a bad guy can be stopped without killing them, you should do that. Because then it's not about preventing more suffering anymore. I gulped. But I don't care about that, she admitted, and the shuffling sound of clothes told me that she had shrugged. More people than you think have the same opinion as me too. There's so much killing happening in this world, that as long as you have good reasons, you might just avoid becoming the bad guy yourself. I thought that over for a minute, during which silence reigned once again. It didn't feel reassuring. But then again, maybe it wasn't meant to. What were you supposed to tell someone that had killed like I did? What would I tell my friends if they ever came to me with similar questions? I would still love them just as much, I was sure of that, at least. But was there even a right answer to that? How has that worked out for you? I asked this time, hesitantly. Not so well, she confessed. Sooner or later, as a ninja, you'll do something that you are not okay with. Something that you'll regret. Nobody that I've known has been able to escape that. Be it from orders or from our own decisions. I closed my eyes for a second. You think I managed to avoid that this time? Why did you kill them, IG? She asked back instead of answering. For a second there, I was tempted to make excuses. I could have easily blamed the blood loss, the pain from my wounds. It would be believable, even if it wasn't the truth. She would have picked up on it, probably, but maybe. They threatened you, and the people that would come next. I admitted. And I got so angry. I wanted them dead, all of them. You did it to protect those close to you, she finished for me. For what it's worth, I think you avoided it. Her fast answer made a huge part of the weight on my shoulders vanish into thin air. Anko. Yes. Thank you. Anytime, kiddo. It was nice, I decided, to be able to breathe without the weight of death on me. Or, at least, with it considerably reduced. It would take time to get over it, but I was confident I could do it. Maybe I would regret it for the rest of my life, but I would move on and continue living. I sighed. Does it get easier? It does, for some people. It doesn't, for others. Eventually, most are okay in the end. And I know you'll be okay, kiddo. I see. And with that issue somewhat resolved for the moment, I was left with another one of my other doubts to take over my mind. I couldn't keep pushing the issue away. Not now that my life choices seemed to be coming back to bite me. I also didn't want to keep avoiding it, to be honest. You know, don't you? I asked, still not looking towards my sensei. About. I trailed off, unsure of how to say it. I do, she accepted, without even needing me to specify. Why did you never say anything? Two very big pairs of eyes, kiddo, she said, as if that answered everything, which it didn't. Or, at least, in normal circumstances, it wouldn't. But I had extra information that nobody knew I had. So, because of both, Hiruzen and Danza, I thought to myself. I chuckled weakly. Sometimes I wish I had just left the academy and the village and settled as a civilian in some unknown town. Life would be much easier if I had done that. And my thoughts were probably true, but they were also not what I wanted. I was happy as I was. I was content with my friends, my brothers and sisters. I was proud of my progress and my strength. I could get past these inconveniences. With everything I wanted to say out of the way, we spent nearly half an hour after that simply sitting there in companionable silence. I had half expected her to break the silence at some point. Maybe she would say something about herself, or maybe she would just get bored and make a conversation more like those we usually had, or maybe just offer some more words of comfort. The silence, though, was both unexpected and relieving in its own way. I was very surprised, though, when, after getting a room for the night, I saw the remnants of tear trails running down my cheeks. Oh! With the mercenaries out of the way, we started moving again. This, though, didn't go as I thought it would. Why aren't we going back to Konoha? I asked once we stopped for a breather, confused by the path we were taking. Idly, I manipulated my tanto with my left arm, trying to get used to it since my arm would take some time to heal completely. Because we are doing a follow-up mission, apparently, she answered, as if that explained everything. I sighed. It really did explain everything, I realized. Yeah, kiddo, should have seen that coming. I took a moment to let that sink in as I thought it over. That and all the information I had at my disposal, obviously. The result was equally obvious too, much to my dismay. After all, we had been sent tracking 2 of the 7 swords. Anko had told me that we joined a side in the Civil War, and now, we were traveling towards the Land of Water. Oh, fuck me, I spat with a grimace. Too young, kiddo, Anko snorted out, clearly amused by my realization. And your girlfriend would have something to say about that. Oh, For fuck's sake, I grumbled to myself. Never gets old, she said, sounding delighted. Everyone falls for that kind of teasing, eventually they all fall, she added ominously. And you wonder why I'm surprised you have friends. My answer was a smack on the back of my head. Oh. So, just wait. Just wait, Anko said, nodding and making me slump down. I just couldn't wait to be back home. I really wanted to just sit down and relax, working on my garden or visiting the vet. But alas, I had to wait in a random spot in the forest for a bunch of mist ninja to come for the swords. Just great, I grumbled internally. And so, there we sat. Anko eating food that I didn't even want to know where it had come from, and me sitting against a tree and idly throwing a kunai against another tree and pulling it back with a thread. Ninja wire was weird to use now. Every time I handled the tool I could feel a phantom pain shot through my right arm. I hoped it would go away soon. It was, after all, one of my favorite things to use. You are the ones the leaf sent. A voice broke me from my musings and my eyes moved towards a 5-person team standing on a tree branch above us, all wearing a mist forehead protector. We are, Anko replied with her mouth full, lazily waving back to them. One of them commented something, low enough not to be heard, that was most assuredly not nice about my sensei. My eyes narrowed slightly. Password? She asked back, gulping down her meal. Roots support the tree from underneath. I almost choked at that. Danza picked that one, didn't he? I thought to myself with a wry smile that went unseen by the others since they were focusing on each other. And the sea pulls back before rising once again. Anko shot back easily before standing up. I did the same quickly and moved to stand behind her. The mist ninja followed suit, standing right in front of us. So, what are you waiting for? The man that seemed to be the leader and spokesperson raised an eyebrow at us. Anko, instead of answering, tilted her head to the side. No, I don't think I'll give them to you. I turned my head to look at her, although I tensed up in preparation. You are betraying us. The guy grew angry instantly, red coloring his face, and the others went for their weapons. Not really, Anko smiled, that smile that everyone that knew her feared. Because, you see, you aren't our allies, are you? Just give the swords to us and the brat and you can live, woman, the man spat out, visibly trying to remain somewhat calm. Nothing has to happen to you, if you stay out of this. IG, do your thing, would you? Anko said, and I tilted my head, just like she had done before, and copied her smile. Free running, intermediate taijutsu, I called out in my mind before doing a quick motion with my hand and jumping as high as I could. Ninja wire moved quickly through the place. A second later, 4 of them stood there, wrapped in steely threads, unable to move. Me, for my part, stood right in front of them, where I had been before, after falling from my jump. Anko, meanwhile, had gotten a hold of the only guy that had managed to escape my trap and had already wrapped him up in one of her bigger snake summons. Good thing I set up those just in case, I thought to myself, looking at the wires. Well, that was easy, I pointed out, surprised. Are you Genin? We are Chunin, one woman in my trap spat out. And this one must be a Jounin, Anko said, looking at the guy in front of her. But still, sending a bunch of Chunin. Is your side running out of competent people? All 5 bristled at that. Or were you coming here thinking that you would be enough to take out a Jounin and his Genin student? Oh, I was right, huh? I didn't know how she gathered that last bit, but I guessed she saw something on them that answered her question. She was scary perceptive like that. We aren't going to talk, the man in her hold said curtly. I don't know about that, Tough guy, she replied with a smirk. You are telling me plenty already. So, you had intel about all this, huh? You probably had inside information. I see, she nodded, her grin widening. Knock those out, IG. They don't know anything useful. Sure, and following that, I shocked the 4 Chunin with a stunning thread until they were unconscious. As this went on though, I couldn't help but wonder if I was really that powerful, taking out Chunin like they were academy students. I had expected to be stronger than normal genin, but all I really had was a bunch of E&D rank techniques, really. Why was it that I was this strong already? Was it the system, affecting everything more than it let on? What do they feed the brats in Konoha these days? A new voice asked, and Anko, the guy that remained awake, and I turned our heads in his direction. I don't know what the other two thought of the new arrival, but I know that I stiffened and my eyes grew wide. There stood a man, wearing a pair of baggy pants, wrist warmers that extended to his elbows and matched the ones on his legs, a pair of black sandals, and a blue belt that crossed his muscular previously mentioned belt held the biggest sword I had ever seen on his back. A forehead protector wore sideways under his spiky black hair, not dissimilar to mine, and the bottom half of his face was covered by bandages. Next to him, slightly behind, stood what seemed to be a girl in a pinstriped outfit under a green haori with white trimmings. The person's long black hair was gathered in a white bun holder, 2 bags left to hand on the sides of their face bound with metal hair cuffs. They also wore a forehead protector, traditionally this time. Their appearance wasn't what surprised me though. It was who they were. Zabuza and Haku. And you are supposed to be the right ones. This time, that is, Anko asked, raising an eyebrow. Doesn't seem like the password will be worth much, the swordsman commented casually. Not really, my sensei shrugged. That complicates matters, the man hummed, and I licked my lips preparing for a much harder fight. What do you think, Haku? I'm not sure, Zabuza-sama. I can take care of her, for sure, he pointed out before signaling to me. The brat though, I'm not sure who would win between you two. There was something very unnerving about the way they were talking. And I could easily see this being the standard conversation they had before killing a target of theirs. The fact that they were here and hadn't been where they should have been before only added to my nerves. No need for that, Anko said with a casual tone, turning around and completely ignoring the man she had been previously interrogating. It's difficult to impersonate Zabuza Momokai of all people. Is that so? The man raised an eyebrow at that, and I could swear I heard a bit of disappointment somewhere there. Yeah, that is so, my sensei nodded amicably. And, just for the sake of that curiosity, if your brat isn't Jounin level, then he doesn't stand a chance, she added, a wide grin on her face. I was torn between being in awe of her recognizing Haku as a boy or incredulous about what she had said. The man hummed, this time his eyes locking firmly on me. Then it would be an interesting fight to see, if nothing else. Right? Anko asked enthusiastically. Why am I not surprised that she gets along with this guy? I thought to myself, somewhat resigned. Zabuza-sama, Haku interrupted softly. Right, the mission. IG. Anko called out, her expression turning serious. Instantly, I pulled out the scroll with the swords. And as simple as that, we are. Out of curiosity, Zabuza interrupted, his tone and eyes telling us that it wasn't mere curiosity what drove his following question. How did you get them? We followed and took out the 2 with them, as simple as that, Anko explained with a raised eyebrow, clearly as unaware as I was about the reason for his question. You fought together. He pressed. They ambushed us separately, my sensei started, her tone somewhat impatient. I could understand. I also couldn't wait for this mission to be over and go back home. The one with Shibuki took me to a trapped place and fought me with the help of a bunch of mercenaries. The one with New Ivory went after IG here. She finished signaling at me. After he took out that guy, he went and helped. The brat took out the swordsman, alone. He prodded again, although I was surprised to notice that there was no disbelief in his voice. Yes. Anko answered, cautiously, and I could see her eyes narrow when Zabuza's eyes snapped towards me again, this time with much more intensity behind them. What's your name? He asked, this time looking straight at me. What's going on? Anko countered, clearly growing agitated with the man's attitude. A second later, she tensed up as a wave of bloodlust washed over us. His name's Zabuza demanded. IG Sato, I answered, gulping down my nervousness and deciding to just get it over with. IG Sato, the man muttered, as if tasting the name. Take out New Ivory, brat. I did so without protest. We were going to give the weapons to them anyway. I could do that much without problem. You took out its wielder in a one-on-one, huh? He whispered, more to himself than to us. This isn't going where I think it's going, is it? I asked myself. Because if defeating one of the 7 swords wielders was an insult to Kiri or something and Zabuza decided that he had to kill me, I would be very pissed. Very pissed indeed. The man nodded firmly after a moment of staring between the legendary sword and me. It's yours now, the swordsman said, with a tone of finality. I blinked. What? What? I blinked in confusion before turning towards Anko. My sensei stood there wide-eyed and obviously as disbelieving as I was feeling. She even turned to me a second later, as if to check with me that we really had heard what we had heard. Zabuza let out an annoyed sigh. It's how the swords are passed down, he explained, sounding like it pained him to do so. You either win it in a battle or a swordsman gives it to you. And if the requirements aren't met. I tried, trailing off with an unsure voice. Is this really happening? Then Kiri hunts the sword down to get it back, and another swordsman will keep it until a new wielder is found, he finished. We never heard of this, Anko pointed out with a frown. Because nobody had ever won by themselves against a swordsman, Zabuza replied curtly. Mato Dai was the only one to do so, and he died to the rest of the swordsmen since he fought them all. If the brat hadn't interfered with yours, you would have been able to keep Shibuki. That's actually what Kiri expected to happen with both swords when we found out about Konoha helping retrieve the swords. Really want to smack you right now, kiddo, my sensei grumbled. I, for my part, was unnerved by the grin that was evident in Zabuza's face even under the bandages. Well, I wouldn't be too happy if I were you, brat, he said, the smirk evident in his tone too. That only means there will be a bunch of Kiri ninja wanting to challenge you for the ownership. Just hope our side wins, at least that way they'll keep the swordsman code and do a proper one-on-one fight for it. On second thought, Anko added, with a wry smile. I think I'm good. Although, you should know, she continued, looking directly at the Kiri swordsman. You ain't getting that sword from him. If I know anything about the kid is that he'll be swordsman level in no time at all. That so? He asked, turning to me once more. I had to do conscious effort not to shiver under those eyes. They were much more intimidating than New Ivory's wielder had been. High praise coming from the student of the Snake of the Sun. In my sensei's eyebrow twitched at that last part, understandably. Anyway, she clapped, clearly done with that conversation. So, the brat's going to be challenged for the sword sometime in the future. Is this going to cause any more problems? She asked, her tone joking although her eyes belied the seriousness behind the conversation. It shouldn't, at least from our side, Zabuza shrugged. With that said, I'll be taking this, he added, throwing the scroll with Shibuki up after taking it from my hand. And we'll be on our way. Good luck with that sword, brat, he directed at me. Anyone else would be cursing your name for taking one of the 7 swords while not being from Kiri. But you took it fairly. There was something very, very surreal about Zabuza speaking like that to me. Where was the man that was called Demon of the Mist? Maybe my memories of just how he was were wrong. It wasn't like I remembered the show anymore, and I didn't know how well I had remembered it when I wrote it down on my notes. Just don't be a weakling, will you? Now that was more what I expected. A second later, Zabuza and Haki disappeared from the place. We, for our part, stood where we were for a minute or so. I took a look at the sword still in my hand. It was long, almost as long as I was tall. Although, being fair, it probably had something to do with me being still 12. A third of it consisted solely of its handle, and at its widest, it was barely more than 2 of my fingers put together. The ninja wire attached to the end of it, I shuddered at the sight, was almost invisible. Much thinner than the normal one, that was for sure. Guess we will have to raise your training standards, again Anko sighed. Just to keep you alive after Kiri's mad swordsman come looking for that thing. Instead of answering, I kept staring at the sword. One of the 7 swords of the mist. Granted, the anime and manga made it look like Same Hada was the only one worth a damn, what with it being sentient and capable of eating freaking chakra of all things. And there was one other that was quite neat. But the rest were kind of meh, or so I recalled. But this was still a legendary sword. And being in the world I needed all the boosts I could get. The system was nice, and it was giving me a fair bit of help with my development. But still, in this world, if you didn't have a chakra beast or a bloodline limit, you weren't much, really. There were exceptions, obviously, such as Minato, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, Hiruzen, but those were legends. Legends that had broken through their limit with time, effort and talent. I didn't have time though. Not with the plot hovering over my head like a sword of Damocles. Now though. New Iberi Mastery LVL1. Increases the skill of the user when fighting with New Iberi according to level. Increases damage done with New Iberi by 5%. Increases accuracy when throwing New Iberi by 5%. Increases chakra flow effectiveness and efficiency by 5% when used on New Iberi. Increases physical stats when using New Iberi by 1%. Now I had something to help me be a little closer to those levels of madness. Now I had something to even the playing field a little bit. Just a bit, but it was enough for now. I welcomed every advantage I could get. I smirked to myself. Yeah, looks like it, I commented softly. Let's go, kiddo. Anko nodded before turning to the still conscious mist ninja that she had trapped. Now, what to do with you? She grinned and the man paled. I looked away, both to take a minute to think and to avoid seeing something that I would be unable to unsee. Oh. There was a lot of white around. The white clothes and sheets over me feeling like they were made of lead. The white ceiling feeling infinitely deep and at the same time oppressively close. The white door almost disappeared on the equally white wall, so close and also so far that I knew I would never walk out of it. Eventually though, I managed to stand up on my own 2 feet. The way towards the only out of the room was agonizingly slow, but I made it. Once I pushed the door open though, I fell right out of it, into an infinite fall. Although, could it be considered a fall, when there was nothing to be seen around, the white room's sight long gone somewhere in the emptiness. Even my own body was invisible, and all I could see was a strange colorless landscape as far as I could see. Who knows how long after that, I appeared somewhere, not quite falling into place as much as I simply popped into existence there. There was little to see, even there. I seemed surrounded by people, but all of them were faceless. Until they weren't. One of them approached, slow steps from where they stood. As the shape grew close, I had trouble focusing on it to find any features to it. All but one detail seemed blurred, making it impossible to recognize anything about the person. All but one, indeed. An impossibly wide smile was very visible on the creature as it continued moving towards me. I noticed that the others were walking behind it too, some distance behind. Something else became clear after some time. Red liquid seemed to fall from the grinning man's neck. Afterwards, the others started bleeding too. Some lost their arms, others simply had blood start pouring out of holes on their bodies. The grinning man grew closer and closer. He was standing right in front of me. He opened his mouth and my eyes snapped open and a quiet gasp filled my lungs with air as I felt my heart hammering inside my chest. A second later, my head fell back against the uncomfortable pillow that I used to sleep on while we camped, halfway towards Konoha already. A sigh escaped my lips and I clenched my eyes shut while taking deep breaths. My nightmares get worse and worse, huh? I thought to myself bitterly. I couldn't remember a time where I didn't have nightmares anymore. The white room was the most vivid memory I had of my past life, the nightmare a seemingly permanent reminder. The void was something that I would never forget. And now, the grinning man and his people had added their part, apparently. Grimacing, I decided to try and sleep some more after seeing that it was still clearly the middle of the night. Oh. Once we made it to Konoha, I found myself surprised. Why, one may ask. Well, I had expected seeing Naruto after what happened in our mission to be much more difficult. After all, his whole character was about peace and forgiveness and such. Meanwhile, there was I, coming back after massacring people in cold blood. Regardless of that, I could only feel eager to meet the blonde. I missed him, truly, and I also really wanted to talk to him about what happened. I didn't know how he would react. Maybe he would be uncomfortable with it, at the least. Maybe he would hate me, at the worst. Still, be it one outcome or the other, or maybe something completely different, the fact was that Naruto was my brother in all but blood. And I really wanted to see him, talk to him. There was a distinct possibility of this going wrong, but not telling him would be even worse. If I couldn't trust him, then, who did I have to trust? I can, talk about this, right? I asked Anko nervously as we walked. I had always kept my tales of C-rank missions vague, since I didn't want to get into trouble and, really, there was much to talk about anyway. But this time, you can tell people about what happened in it. Just, don't describe too many details and leave the important stuff out of it. You are smart, I think you can fill in the holes yourself, my sensei explained, and I nodded slowly. So, don't make it easy for people to put together who did what we did, I reasoned in my head. And don't talk about our involvement in the Mist Civil War. I'm also guessing I can't talk about New Ivory, I thought to myself, the storage seal tag sitting on my trousers feeling as heavy as the sword itself despite the fact that it didn't actually weigh more than a sheet of paper. Eventually, my sensei and I took our separate paths. She kept going, straight to the Hokage Tower to report our mission details. I would normally go with her, but she had told me that I could skip that part this time. I hadn't protested much against that, I'll admit. I was very grateful that we arrived pretty late to the village. That would make it so that it would be strange for someone else to be at home, unless Naruto had suddenly decided to host a sleepover. There was also the fact that not many in our group would be in for such a thing. Chaoji might, he was nice like that, but everyone else would probably decline or have other things to do. "I'm home," I called out, lower than I usually would as the nerves started hitting me. "IG." Naruto called excitedly from the second floor and a smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "You came really quick. You have to tell me how it went." The blonde stopped dead on his tracks as he took in the sight of me. I wondered what went through his head as he saw the patch on my cheek and my white bandages on my right arm. "What happened?" he asked shakily, and I gave him a weak smile. "Oh. Naruto Povey. It was a long night, that one. For me and for IG, and I didn't think he was worried about the right things, if I was completely honest. He told me all of it, even things that he thought he shouldn't. He said so himself and I believed him. And for that trust, I wouldn't breath a word of it to anyone. Not even our own group if IG didn't want me to. He still kept some things from me, but I could care less about those. I knew what I needed to know. IG had gotten hurt. Hurt enough that he would forever carry the scars of the event on his arm. He hadn't shown me, but he had, after some insistent prodding, described the wound in detail for me. Hurt enough that he had just passed out on the ground and bleeding. I could picture it, his body just lying there. And if not for his sensei, he might never have came back to me, to us. I would have nightmares about that image, I knew that much. IG, my brother. The boy that had always been this unreachable goal to me and to the rest of the group. The boy that could wipe the floor with half the group in a battle. He had almost died. The worst part of it was that I had not been anywhere near the whole thing. And even if I had been, I wouldn't have been able to help. That helplessness ate at my mind the more I thought about it. Maybe it made me a horrible person, that I didn't care that he killed the guy with the cool sword. Maybe it made me a horrible person, that I didn't care about any of the others either. But after putting myself in IG's place, thinking about this madman threatening the people I cared about like that, I couldn't bring myself to care the smallest bit. A part of me did feel guilty and shameful about not caring, but that was about it. But I didn't want to lose IG. And I didn't want to lose anyone in our group. And I could understand, especially right then and there with my brother's wounds evident to the eye, the fear of losing those close to one. I certainly didn't know how I would have reacted to something like that. And knowing IG like I did, I knew that losing people important to him was one of his greatest fears. I understood that much. "I don't care, IG," I said, my face resolute as I faced my brother. He stared back at me with wide eyes and I continued on. I needed to talk, or IG would worry too much and think stupid things. "You are alive, and you did what you did because you care about your sensei, about us. You could have gone about it differently," I admitted, because lying would only make things worse. But I kept talking quickly before he could speak or his brain got ahead of itself. "But I still don't care. You came back, alive." I choked out the last word as my eyes prickled with unched tears. "And that's all I care about, that's all I need to know." "Naruto, He started, but I didn't let him speak. That's all I need to know because I already know that you are a good person, I said, because there was no other way to look at it. No matter what, you are a good person, IG. I know that, the group knows that. And I'll say it as many times as you need to hear it. Because I know that when you get your ideas in mind it's difficult to change your opinion. But I won't let my brother think he is a monster. Silence followed my words as red stared into blue. Naruto, his voice reached me soft and vulnerable in a way that I had never heard from him except when he was having nightmares. I don't know if I ever told you, but you are going to make a great Hokage, he said, a watery smile forming on his face as he straightened on his seat. I know it. And I'll make sure of it. And you'll make a great Shinobi no Kami, IG. Oh. IG Povi. I see, Hannah said slowly after I gave her an abridged version of my mission, very similar to the one I had given to the group. After my talk with Naruto, it had been much easier to speak about it with our friends. And I had been incredibly relieved that they had reacted similarly to my blonde brother. Sakura had surprised me, although in hindsight I shouldn't have been, being the one that took it the worst. Fortunately, she didn't start yelling or anything of the sort, but it was clear as day that she disagreed strongly with how I had handled the situation. Hinata and Chaoji I had expected to have similar thoughts too, but I was still surprised since they didn't take it as badly as I expected them to. In the Akimichi's words, lots of bad things can happen in a mission, especially at higher levels. We could only learn from them and expect better of ourselves in the future. He obviously sounded like he was quoting someone. His parents were my bet, but that didn't make it any less reassuring. It also served to remind me, once more, that this world was very different than the one I had grown up in. It seemed, too, that I was still coming to terms with that even after the years I had spent in that world. Hopefully, I would accept this fact soon, or my life would be very complicated, I could tell. Everyone also seemed more interested in the news that I was now the wielder of a legendary sword, go figure. I had, however, only told my group of friends and I had also made sure that they knew to keep the news to themselves. That's what Anko and I had agreed was the course of action to take. And considering that she hadn't said anything after reporting to the higher-ups, I guessed the order stood. I'm sorry that happened to you, IG. The Inuzuka sitting next to me said softly, her hand petting the head of Hai, that sat on her left. Meanwhile, mine did the same with Lu that had taken the place on my right. I've never gone on dangerous missions myself, Hannah explained with a sad, somewhat bitter smile. But I've seen my mother come back from some that went wrong for one reason or another. I know she's done things that neither she nor I are proud of. But it doesn't change the fact that I love her and that I'm grateful that she gets to come back. What I'm trying to say is, she continued quickly, that the people who know you will also know what kind of person you are, despite what you might do. You just have to make sure the darkness of the world doesn't get to you, change you to fit it. Thanks, I said as a smile formed on my face. It wasn't big, but I meant it. I thought for a second that you were going to say you love me. My grin widened as I saw her sputter with a red face and the dogs around us giving their version of a laugh. All was still good. Oh. I've got news for you, kiddo, Anko said with a smirk as we met up in a training ground. She gave a wry grin as I groaned out loud. These aren't bad news, at least I gave a tired sigh at that and nodded. Right, hit me with it already. First of all, there's a good chance that the Chunin exams will be delayed, which gives us more time to get you to a level that will thoroughly embarrass the other villages, she explained with a grin. The why, I can't tell you. And you can't tell anyone I told you this either, but blah blah blah, you know the drill. I nodded at that. Sure, let's change canon some more, why don't we? I thought to myself. I'm not sure there even is a point to my folk knowledge anymore. Most events aren't going to happen how they would have now, or will be very different, at least I know the general idea, I guess. Second of all, she put up 2 fingers. Is that I know what you've been studying on the side? She blinked as I nodded. It seemed that she expected me to get nervous or something. But honestly, I already knew she knew about danza. It wasn't much of a stretch to assume she knew about everything else. Fucking brat, you could at least act a little. She clicked her tongue in annoyance when I gave her my worst impression of an utterly shocked face. Anyway, she rolled her eyes at me. If you have a project you've been working on or want to start one, I'll be here to supervise any experiments you want to try. Just, please be sure they are somewhat safe beforehand. I don't want to see you blow yourself up. Not gonna have them checked. I raised an eyebrow. Jutsu creation isn't something that anyone can do, she explained. That's why few people have personally made jutsu of their own. Some people compare the talent to bloodline limits, you either can make jutsus that actually work or you can't. There's some people that can take a look at it and know if it'll blow you up or not, but that's about it. That made some sense, I guessed. It gave somewhat of a reason for why there were so few people with original jutsu around. So, you'll try and make one of your own. A low-ranked one, she demanded more than suggested. And we'll see where that goes, okay? Sure, I nodded. Although internally I was grinning. I was sure that I would get a skill for this. And once I did, it would be much easier from there. But she didn't need to know that. Third of all, her grin turned into something that sent shivers down my spine. We talked about upping your training, remember? I hope you are prepared. Once your arm is back in top condition, your ass is mine, kiddo. Third person POV. A week, the man spat out in contempt. It's been a week and we still have no idea how that mess happened, Hiruzen. I'm well aware, Danza the Hokage sighed. The swordsman fiasco, as the council had started to call it, had been nothing short of a catastrophe. One that ended rather well, all things considered, but a catastrophe nonetheless. A talent like Ig Sata's wasn't something that one came across every day. And while the rising stars that were Sasuke Uchiha in combat and Naruto Uzumaki in traps and Fu in jutsu gave many of the older generation a much-needed relief after the Kyuubi attack, Sata was still their best rookie. The new batch of the academy was even better than the older one was at that very moment, many would point out. Yes, Neji Hyuga would have been the pride of the clan if he had been from the main family. Rock Lee seemed to be a Mato guy in the making. And even Tenten Higurashi was taking the simple and often overlooked Bukajutsu to levels that few did. But they were all the previous batch had to give, in contrast with Teams 7, 8 and 10, not to mention Ige's apprenticeship. But everyone was also aware of what almost had happened. Everyone knew of the connection Ig Sata had with the previously mentioned promising teams. The impact of his death would be lasting, especially so early in all of their careers. Yes, death was part of the job, and everyone knew it. But losing such a prominent figure was bound to scar many if not all of the rookies. It was also the reason many tried to keep genin as such for as long as possible and slowly ease them onto the truths of their world. It should have been a lower rank at best, the leader of Root muttered to himself. And the Hokage couldn't help but share the sentiment. A lower rank, that was all the mission should have been. Contact wasn't even necessary. The mission was tracking the pair, not confronting them. But regardless of that, the pair shouldn't have been Chunin, they should have been Chunin at the absolute worst. A pair of new swordsmen sent to mess with the land of fire, to both retaliate and send a message to the leaf. But the point was that, in case of confrontation, there should have been a decent chance of at least escaping. Reality had turned out to be very different from what actually happened. Our Anbu, my root and even the Mist's intelligence, the Hokage's old ally, continued grumbling and pacing around his office, giving voice to both their thoughts. How could all three of them be fooled in such a manner? Alas, I do not know, Hiruzen said, closing his eyes to calm down his worries about such a breach in their sources. But we have bigger problems. Bigger than someone being able to give us false information. The next generation is always our biggest responsibility. The Hokage knew he had hit a nerve as he saw Danza tense up after he finished speaking. You know what you need to do. I do, his old comrade admitted, clear annoyance in his tone. He's too smart not to consider such a possibility. But you need to speak with him. I was actually considering alternative routes to Danza. It's not time yet, Hiruzen the man denied vehemently before sighing and letting his shoulders fall. But it's soon going to be. He trailed off before the warhawk felt himself growing annoyed once more. If it hadn't ended like it did. I know, old friend, I know. Both men traded a look. They would find out how it had happened, if it was the last thing they did. For the moment though, Danza's expression showed something that few people would have recognized or even noticed. The ghost of a grin that the Hokage would almost have called proud. E&D rank jutsu only, Hiruzen, he said after a moment, and the leader of the village could only return his smile. And now he has one of the swords. Indeed. Oh. I could only stare, half bemused and half worried, at the papers in front of me on the table. Files upon files, maps and the like included, all of them explaining my mission and what had been known about it beforehand. It matched the intel we had been given, with added information here and there that didn't seem overly relevant, which would explain why we hadn't been given it. I was almost amused by the fact that all this had been dropped in front of me as I waited for some mission or task from Danza. If I didn't know better, I would have thought that the man had given me this as some sort of excuse for what had happened. And it made some sense, really. After all, I had considered the possibility of our mission with the swords being a setup to kill me or something. But that had been quickly scratched. Why would Danza of all people want me dead? I had been doing exactly as he wanted me to for a long time now. Granted, that in itself could be a point against me, in someone's book. But to have me killed? No, I didn't think so. In my head, the only thing that made sense was that someone else had tried to kill me, or, also a distinct possibility, Anko. Who? I had some ideas but nothing certain. With some luck the higher-ups would deal with them before they dealt with their targets some other way. I don't really have a problem with this, I voiced to my invisible watcher. But don't get my friends involved next time, I added. I kept my tone respectful though, no need to antagonize anybody. The thought of what could have happened to the others if they had been in the mission haunted me. After all, it was much less likely that the grinning man would have underestimated the 3 genin than me. I received no response, but I didn't expect one, really. I could only hope that Danza would listen to my request though. If he didn't, I didn't know what I would do, but I would have to do something. They knew how to get to me now, I had given them the answer to that very easily. And I would be damned if my friends were used against me. Despite my reasoning though, there was more than a little bit of bitterness and wariness in me regarding the decisions of my leaders. But I couldn't quite do anything regarding that even if I wanted to. For now, I could only do so much, despite their rather big interest in me. I was far from good enough to make any demands. That would change though. New ivory, sitting in a storage seal in my pocket, attested to that. And furthermore, I thought as I pushed the files aside and pulled a now familiar notebook in front of me, my plans for original jutsu would help some more. Maybe I would never create something like the Flying Thunder God technique, but if I could create a bunch of useful lower-ranked jutsu, it would be enough. Now, if I could just work out how to do this part, I grimaced as I went over the part of my current project that was blocking my progress. It would be slow and difficult, but I would do it. I needed as much power as I could get. It also didn't help that it was one of the few things I could work on while my arm healed, truth be told. Here's hoping I'll get an ambidextrous skill or something. I amused to myself wryly as I struggled to write with my left hand. Oh. It's still hard to accept. I mean, we've been doing this for years, Shika. One would think you would get used to it, I joked with a smirk as we reset the board for another game. I, of course, knew what he was talking about, but I was honestly growing tired of these conversations with my friends. We were both sitting at his house, the rest of the group seemed to all be otherwise occupied at the moment. Ino was at her family's shop and Chaoji was helping his mother with something clan-related that I couldn't quite remember. Team 7 was training and Team 8 was doing missions, or so we were told. I know how you feel, he admitted with a grimace. It's just, you were this unmovable person in our minds. Never to be defeated. Like Chunin, or the Hokage. I almost preened at being compared to such people, but the weight of his words was still settling on me. It was, after all, the first time one of my friends explained it to me so openly. I'm not invincible, I said simply, with a small smile on my face. He nodded, although his eyes stayed on the board. I know what you mean though. But the mission, obviously, didn't go as planned. Something like this shouldn't happen again. But it could, he countered, and I had no response to that. He knew it too. And we understood it even before, to some extent, he admitted wryly. The point is, I am worried. My eyes snapped towards him and stared. Worried? I asked, because it sounded like they were worried about more than just what had happened and could have happened. The group as a whole is worried about something happening to you, or any of us, really, he explained slowly as he made his move. I simply turned to the board half-heartedly, my attention staying mainly on the Nara. But I am worried about you, IG. I like you, I really do, but you aren't, well. I turned to him with raised eyebrows. You worry about us too much, he continued, completely undeterred. And we worry too, that's okay, you are our brother in all but blood, he added just as I went to say something, making me close my mouth with an annoyed expression. But you still worry too much, IG. It's like there's nothing else to do with your life but to take care of us, and I may not be a Yamanaka, but that's not a healthy mindset. It was my turn to move. But I didn't move, I kept my eyes fixated on the board, but nothing in particular. That's what worries me, IG. He was still talking. And I know. I think I know, at least. You are like Naruto. You spend too much time on your own. Why, I don't know. And I don't care about that. I know you have your secrets. I felt my throat closing in itself. And you can have them, but you can't keep living like this. My hands folded together on my lap, nervously fidgeting as I tried to keep my mind calm. Long, deep breaths filling my lungs through the knot in my throat. "We want you to be happy too," Ig Shikamaru said, his tone turning to a soft voice that I had never heard from him. My eyes locked on his black ones and I let out a drawn-out sigh. "That's all I'm saying." "I know," I choked out. It's like I forgot how to be happy by myself," I managed to say after a moment, and he gave me a sad smile in response. "Then we'll help you remember, I guess," he said. From there, none of us said anything and we simply resumed our game in silence. A corner of my mind took that moment to chide me about what I had been doing so far. It was a part of my thoughts that I had refused to listen to so far. I had enough, my mind said. I didn't need anything else to be happy. I had my friends, my family, and that's enough. But now the solitary thought had Shika's backing, and it returned with a vengeance. And now I couldn't push it away anymore. I sighed before grimacing. Shikamaru was giving me a glare that dared me to forget about this conversation. Of course, I thought to myself. Oh. It took a week and a few days for my arm to be fully functional again. Jutsu made a lot of things easier, but not that easy. I wasn't an expert, but I was pretty sure that my arm would have never worked just fine after being shredded by that wire in my original world. So, 2 weeks or so was okay in my books. It wasn't like I hadn't been able to work on some other things either. I had worked on my original jutsu ideas for a whole lot, and Anko had been teaching me as much as she could without things being practical. I had made more progress on poison crafting, that was for sure. Now though, I was too busy to think about that. My right hand came up and blocked a katana with New Iberi's blade. After that, much faster than I would have liked, I had to tense the legendary sword's wire with my left hand on my left side, blocking my opponent's attack once more, this time with the thread reinforced with chakra flow. New Iberi mastery has gone up a level. Ignoring the screen, I tried to slash with my sword. Emphasis on trying, since I already knew she would block it. It was kind of good that Shikamaru had gotten me used to crushing defeat, because sparring with a Kenjutsu master was about as much as one can utterly destroy someone else's confidence. It made me feel like I was back on the first days of training after waking up in this world, if I was being honest. It wasn't a nice feeling when 90% of my days were spent trying to get stronger. But regardless of that, I continued, blocking, slashing, trying to use the wire, dodging. Basic Kenjutsu has gone up a level. A smile tugged at my lips. I was leveling like 3 things at the same time in this spar alone. It was about as much as I could min-max without hindering something's progress. New Iberi mastery, basic Kenjutsu and chakra flow would be part of my main skill set, for obvious reasons. The legendary blade, for as awesome as it was, had set me back on my sword training some, since it was so much longer than the tanto I had been using before. And I also had to get used to the wire that came with it. Yes, I used ninja wire a lot, but having ninja wire wrapped around your fingers and having it attached to the hilt of your blade was a significant difference. Every little change was, actually, which made adding things to my fighting style so much of a pain. But I would deal with it, I had time and I had motivation. There was also the fact that the sword more than made up for the problems it brought. While it wasn't as impressive as, say, eating fucking chakra, the sharpness and durability it gained from chakra flow made it so that there was little it couldn't block, even with the wire. And the point of it could piece just about anything. So yeah, having an indestructible sword, so long as chakra was supplied, and a scarily sharp one at that, was very much something I would put up with to make up for having to train with a completely new weapon. God, How I wish I could use lightning flicker, I moaned internally as I was given a shallow cut on my cheek. It would heal pretty much instantly with a healing palm, but it still sucked. You are progressing pretty well, Kat commented, giving me a much needed moment to gather myself and breathe. I'm impressed. I'll take it as the high praise it is, I replied as I rested my hands on my knees before straightening my back. Truth be told, the combo of Anko Mitarashi's apprentice and prodigy titles was very broken. Ever since I had gotten the secondary title, I had been using both while training, and since the former still seemed to apply when I trained with someone else under Anko's guidance, my progress went fast. Basic Kenjutsu LVL 15. Increases the skill of the user when fighting with a sword according to skill level. Chakra Flow, Lightning LVL 10. Technique with which the user can channel elemental chakra into weapons to grant them special enhancements. Increases the cutting power of the weapons affected by 50%. Weapons have a 50% chance of causing numbness on contact. Consumption 5 chakra points per second. New Iberi Mastery LVL 3. Increases the skill of the user when fighting with New Iberi according to level. Increases damage done with New Iberi by 15%. Increases accuracy when throwing New Iberi by 15%. Increases chakra flow effectiveness and efficiency by 15% when used on New Iberi. Increases physical stats when using New Iberi by 3%. Very fast, I thought to myself, feeling pretty proud of myself. Yes, New Iberi Mastery was still pretty low-leveled and going a bit slow in comparison to the others, but since it appeared to take the basic /intermediate/advanced set and combine them in one, I guessed it made some sense to have it go slower. I wasn't complaining. Yes, I know, my apprentice is awesome, Anko said, appearing next to us with an expression so smug you would think she was the one we were talking about. I raised an eyebrow at the woman and, if my guess was right, the Anbu did too, under her mask of course. Sometimes I wonder why I'm your friend, Kat said. Took the words right out of my mouth, I nodded. Everyone is mean, Anko pouted. Oh. No code today? My teacher asked curiously another day as we met for more training. I decided to go without it, I answered, shrugging lightly. It gets shredded or burned more often than not. So, what's the point of even having it? In the end, it doesn't make up for the usefulness of the extra pockets, really. That was true, but my fight with the grinning man had also pointed out something for me. If I needed to use the inventory, chances were that I would have to forsake my intention of keeping it a secret. It was fortunate that it had stayed so after I used it on him, but the lesson was still there. The other change to my usual outfit was the bandages on my forearms. I had changed them to white when I started using actual, real bandages for my right one. Now though, I kept using white aesthetically too. It took away some of the edginess that my previous clothes had, especially now that I didn't wear the coat either. And I must admit that I liked my new attire just as much as the other one. Your call. I had told you it wouldn't make much of a difference, Anko commented with a shrug of her own. So long as you have something to carry your tools on and don't wear anything too bright or unnatural, it'll be okay. Those white bandages shouldn't give you too much trouble, but be careful while trying to hide. Might want to take them off while in stealth mode or wear your dark red ones. Noted, I nodded. Well, what are you waiting for, she smirked. I'm sure you have this on the bag already, so there's no point really in wasting time. I know you don't need me to actually teach you any more than you've read. Nodding once more, my brows furrowed before I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath in as I focused and recalled everything that I knew about the jutsu I was about to use. Everything I had read and everything that was similar to those I already knew. A quick succession of hand seals followed as my eyes locked on a tree some distance away from the both of us. It was much longer than I was used to, although it wasn't the first jutsu that I learned that had as many. The body flicker though, wasn't considered as a battle technique in my brain though. That spot was reserved for the lightning version of it. I finished the 10 seals and pushed all stray thoughts from my mind. Lightning came alive on my hands as I drew them away from each other, and I had a split second to witness and rejoice in the sheer awesomeness of the fact that I was literally handling lightning on the palm of my hands. Then, I pushed forward. The attack wasn't quite a lightning bolt as much as it was a strange coalition of smaller charges of electricity shooting in roughly the same direction. I was a strange sight, but it was also much more epic than a simple bolt would have been, or at least that was my opinion. Certainly better than its counterpart, since electromagnetic strike would have at most splintered the wood all over. This one though, broke the trunk so much that the tree almost fell over, not to mention that it could hit a wider zone, so it was harder to dodge. New skill acquired, lightning release, electromagnetic murder. Nice. Nice, Anko said, unknowingly echoing my mind. Kind of expected of you, at this point, but still very impressive. Way to make a compliment lose its value, Teach, I grumbled, although there was no heat to it. I knew everyone expected me to do well, to do even better than well. The pressure was not entirely welcome, but I had learned to live with it. And sometimes, it even managed to feel nice, encouraging. Next one, kiddo, she voiced, pointing at an untouched tree. Finding one of those was always a challenge in itself, I had noticed. Understandable, considering that these were training grounds, so it made sense for the trees to take a lot of hits. I repeated the process, same as before really. Although this time, I ended with the fingers of my right hand forming a circle in front of my mouth. As I took a breath in, I felt the hot air inside my lungs burn fiercely, reaching a temperature that should have made me combust from the inside. Instead, the feeling was kept under control and promptly pushed up and out of my mouth. The fireball flying and ultimately hitting the new tree. The poor plant ignited into a fire that was quickly put out with a quick water jutsu from Anko. Almost the whole thing had gone up in flames though, and I was quite happy with those results. New skill acquired, fire release, fireball. Even better, my sensei nodded, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. This is all we'll be working on from now on. Well, this and what you already know. There's little chance of you getting these pairs to a point where you can use them without seals before the exams, but it should kickstart you for the final round, which you should be given some more time to train. Nothing for the first rounds? I asked curiously, my eyes focusing on the remaining water of her technique. Not right now. And don't even think about it, kiddo. This time she sent a full-on smirk my way. Adding another element to your list will only hinder you. You learned fire to counter your weakness. Water would boost your strength, but dealing with so many elements isn't going to do you any favors. Keep to what you've got for now. When would you say I'm ready for a third? I questioned this time, not really upset about her denying me some other techniques. I had kind of seen that coming. I would wait until you are a jounin, or Takubetsu jounin, whatever comes first, she shrugged. Shouldn't take you too long. It sounded reasonable, but it still bothered me a bit. After all, my circumstances weren't exactly normal. I sighed. I would have to deal with it, I guessed. And I thought to myself, The issue of time is still a thing. I really don't have enough time to level so many things. I much prefer to work on fire. During one of the breaks an hour or so later, I looked at my new skills. Lightning Release, Electromagnetic Murder 2. C-rank technique with which the user creates a wave of electricity from their hands. Hand seals 9. Consumption 38 chakra points. Weird that it got a consumption reduction right at the very beginning at level 1, I thought to myself. But I'm not complaining, this is much more expensive right now than my other jutsu. Fire Release, Fireball LVL2. D-rank technique with which the user launches a fireball at a target. Hand seals 5. Consumption 19 chakra points. Kinda reminds me of electromagnetic strikes stats, I noted with a small smile. Here's hoping I'll be ready for the exams. Well, things are all over the place, Anko commented, tired as the day the exams were supposed to be held drew near. The Chunin exams especially. They have been delayed for 6 months. They are all but changing the exam's yearly date, actually, since this would affect next year's. That, okay. I shrugged. I didn't much care for that change. Really, with the things I knew of the future, that was the least of my worries. Yeah, I get you, she nodded, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It's a nightmare of paperwork, but at least it's not my nightmare. We shared a relieved look before she straightened. Still, this change affects you, kiddo. I can't say much, but the exam should be harder than they were supposed to be. I tensed up. With all the shit that went down in canon, it would get harder. I can't tell you why, the higher-ups are keeping it hush-hush, but they've told all the senseis to up the training, and there's only one reason for that. Okay, so, train harder, got it, I nodded before blinking as Anko flicked my forehead with a finger. None of that, Mr. She chided. You are already training yourself into the ground and from there finding a way to continue training. We'll continue as we have been doing so far. No, I want you to look for a hobby, something to do besides training when you are not with me. I mean, I have hobbies, I grumbled. And I do them, but I don't see why I should train less if things are as you said. You are way out of any normal Genin's league, Brat Anko said, taking a deep breath in as if to contain her exasperation. If you lose to someone in the exams, I'm sure no one will have any reason to think you are a weakling. I mean. No, IG, she interrupted, her tone firm. I'm your sensei. You will listen to me. My back straightened at that. She had never pulled her rank on me like that. She then deflated, almost looked defeated. I'm worried about you, kiddo. You train too much, you worry too much. And that's no way of living your life. It's like there's nothing else to do with your life but to take care of us, and I may not be a Yamanaka, but that's not a healthy mindset. Shika's words replayed in my mind and I grimaced. I wanted to deny it, deny all their accusations. But they were right, I knew. I had accepted it, but I didn't know what to do. When I looked back at my sensei, she was staring back at me with a sad, pitying expression. I hated it. I don't know what to do, I choked out, a bitter smile appearing on my face. So much for living life to the fullest, huh? I thought self-deprecatingly. I'll give you a clue, Anko offered with a smile, and I looked at her expectantly. Ask that girlfriend of yours on a date, kiddo. I'm sure people heard my facepalm from the other side of the village. Of course you would say that, I grumbled. I don't have anyone that I like that, I dismissed. And it was true. I had actually considered asking Hannah on a date once or twice. But she was 18 and I was freaking 12 pushing for 13. Maybe when I was her age it would be okay, but right that moment, there was just no way. Come on, kiddo, if you are worrying about your chances, don't. You are prime boyfriend material, or so I've heard. I let out a long drawn-out groan at that. I knew that much already. I had been first place in the academy and with plenty of margin. That had, eventually, gotten me a small group of girls that acted just like Sajuke's fangirls. I just, really don't know what to do, I admitted, my expression begging her to take this seriously. This isn't about what happened during the mission, is it? She asked, and I tensed up. Flashes of grinning faces and blood shooting through my mind. No. I'm dealing with it. I don't think it's affecting me, I guess I mumbled, unsure. Because honestly, how was one to know for sure if you are traumatized by something or not? Sometimes the mind is really complicated, especially one's own. For what's worth, I think you are doing fine too. Still affected, but you are getting better, she commented, and I gave her a small smile. And, as for what to do in your free time, that's kind of unique for everyone. I like to go out at night and drink, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. It lets me unwind. Going into the forest of death also works. Dumb the animals may be, but they make for great punching bags. Why am I not surprised? I asked as my smile turned wry. Point is, it needs to be something that isn't your job, Anko explained. Even if you enjoy training, it becomes a chore if you only do that as a means of entertainment. I enjoy my job at the T&I shuddered in that part. But I do other things too. I mumbled, my mind trying to come up with something other than training to entertain myself. My first thought was free running. I had loved using the skill, moving through the village at high speeds and so, well, freely. It had been a nice feeling. I had also been doing so more for enjoyment than I had for the levels, which I guess was the point that Anko was trying to make here. Partially, at least. Then, my brain supplied an image of my bedroom wall, where I had drawn the map of the village when I still used drawing. It had been a nice project that had little to do with my ninja duties, even if the skill could come in handy at some point. However, I had stopped using both skills after I maxed them, I realized with some bitterness. I didn't need to continue training them, really. My drawing could probably improve some more, and get the boosts of the skill to be even better, but that would have taken too long. And thus, I had deemed that a waste of time. Live life to the fullest, indeed, a part of my mind mocked. And it was sad that I could only think of two hobbies to pass my time that didn't directly involve my ninja career. And they still involved it indirectly. All those comments about me being a training maniac weren't so funny all of a sudden. Have some ideas? Anko asked, her expression soft. A rare occurrence, that one, although I had been seeing a more personal side of her lately, I noticed. I think so, I nodded slowly. It was a start, at least. I could think some more later. I froze. In my mind, the picture of a lonely boy sitting on a bed surrounded by white walls flashed by. In the boy's hands was a book, small as it was, being the only piece of color inside the room. The boy's eyes firmly locked on the pages, a small smile that would occasionally widen or turn sad. A smile that quickly formed in my face. A vestige of my past life that I can bring to this one, I guess, I thought to myself. Yeah, I think I have some ideas, I replied, a bit more confident this time. Oh. After that, I went to some of my friends, Shino, Ino and Shika, and asked their opinion about my ideas for hobbies. The general consensus had been yeah, sounds like fun. The Yamanaka though, had added gardening to my list and I had to agree that I quite enjoyed that. She made sure to give me some non-poison applicable plants for my garden though, in order for me to put a little more distance between my hobbies and my job. And thus, I found myself sitting on the roof of a particularly tall building. My eyes looked around, my feet dangled idly over the edge and a slight smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. It's a nice view from here, I thought to myself, a corner of my mind chiding me for never stopping to just look at this beautiful place. Taking another look around, I nodded and picked up the notebook I had set next to me. Moving to the side of the building that had the best view and settled myself. Opening the notebook on a blank page, I started drawing. A part of me rebelled against the thought of doing something that was clearly not gonna help me against the probable future end of the world. But that was the part of me that everyone was worried about, and if I cared about anything other than surviving the future, it was about the people close to me. I would be damned if I affected them negatively. Pausing on my drawing, I took a deep breath in and relaxed my now tense shoulders. I can't even relax properly, I thought wryly, no wonder everyone was so concerned. In the end, I spent an hour or so just sitting there and drawing. At times, I was able to relax properly. Or at least I thought so. It was kind of a freeing experience. It reminded me of other times, like when I visited the Inuzuka vet or things like that, which I guessed counted towards me relaxing. But this was something that I could do by myself, something that was mine alone. And that held weight, it seemed. I should see about getting a book or two on the way back, I mused as I stood up and stretched my back from sitting there for so long. At the time, I didn't notice, but later one I would be told that for the rest of that day I walked around with a smile on my face. A month later. Basic Kenjutsu Max. Increases the skill of the user when fighting with a sword according to skill level. Intermediate Kenjutsu, Active, LVL1. Increases the skill of the user when fighting with a sword according to skill level. Active effect increases the user's physical stats by 1. Active effect consumption 50 energy points per second. Kenjutsu Master, here I come, I thought to myself before I refocused on the book I had in my hands. Anko, Kat and I were taking a break from training. The two women were sitting somewhere away from me and I was sitting by myself, reading. My sensei had actually looked surprised when I said that I had brought a book to read and not study. I was starting to slowly see why everyone had been concerned. And I was also really appreciating that they had made me do this, because all this time to just calm down had done wonders to my mind. I didn't think I would have recovered nearly as well as I did from my kills if I had just continued as I had been. Granted, I still got flashes of that day every time I saw blood and I flinched away every time I had someone else use ninja wire on me. But I was slowly getting better. The first time it had happened I had frozen for a good few seconds, after all. Back to the point though, I had also taken to spending more time with my friends and at the vet. It was a nice way to relax, in my opinion. And if I wasn't allowed to train as much, I really wanted to do that. It wasn't until I actually started doing that I realized we had started to distance ourselves from one another. My best guess was that it started when we graduated. Since every team had different times when they did stuff and at the end of the day everyone just wanted to go home, we had started to spend less time with members of other teams. I had been especially worried about this and very grateful to Anko for having me have more time to myself. Since I was in a team by myself, it had affected me much more than the others. It was nice to be able to reconnect with everyone. Okay, breaks over my sensei's voice pulled me from my thoughts and I frowned. Usually, we took much longer to rest than we had this time. My confusion was quickly put to rest with her next statement. I want to know about your side projects, kiddo. They are, okay, I think I answered unsure as I put my book aside and stood up. I think they are, kinda ready, but I'm not completely sure. So, I've been rechecking them to make. How long have you felt like they are ready? She asked, interrupting me, and I paused to blink. I mean, a week. I said, taken aback. And have you found any problems? No, but, I mean. Let's test them. Then she nodded, and my eyes widened. What? But, you said yourself that these are difficult things to get rig. You showed me your ideas, I even took them to our experts and they said they were fine, her fingers making the around experts. Or, at least, they are fairly sure that if they fail, they won't cause any permanent damage. Fairly sure isn't very reassuring, I grumbled to myself. She said softly, and my eyes found hers. She was giving me a smile, not a smirk, a smile. I know you are nervous. But you've been studying this for a while. You've been working on this a lot too, I know. It'll be okay. Why the rush though? I asked, for once showing my worry as I rubbed the back of my neck and looked away. If you want to use them on the Chunin exams, you have to start training with them now, she explained. So, what'll it be? Do we start now or do you push it until after the exams? I'm fairly sure that you can pass either way, so it's your choice. But if you won't use them there, it would just delay your training if you spent time with that. That makes sense, I thought with a grimace. I still had no idea what had happened to the Chunin exams, but I was fairly sure that something big was going to happen. Even bigger than what my folk knowledge told me. And that was a worrying thought indeed. I need every edge I can get, I nodded as I took a deep breath in. Anko nodded back and Kat stood to the side slightly away from us, tilting her head slightly. I closed my eyes and went over both of the techniques that I could call my own. They weren't all that, really. After all, one was labeled as an E rank and the other as a D rank. But they were mine. Opening my eyes, I calmly pulled out threads of ninja wire and wrapped them around my fingers. A sense of anticipation took over me because, despite my nervousness, I was really looking forward to this. It was one thing to know that I could, kinda, do magic. It was another altogether to know that I could have created magic of my own. It was almost like when I was about to use my first jutsu ever. With the threads set, I looked forward and went through a quick succession of hand seals. A blue screen appeared in front of me, followed by another, but I pushed both aside as I focused on what I was doing. I felt my chakra flow through my arms and onto the wire, just like with stunning thread. Except, this time, it was slower, more controlled than the high-speed electric technique. Pulling my hands up, I laid the chakra on the threads and they came alive. Each thread moved, like an octopus's limbs with a twitch of my right index finger. One of the wires moved forward at first quickly and then slowly until the tip was floating right in front of Anko's face. With another gesture from both hands, all wires wrapped on themselves, forming a sort of cord. With a deep breath in and then a sigh, I undid the work and then let the wires fall lifelessly on my sides. A grin forming on my face. That went much better than I expected, I commented, and Anko hummed. You certainly had more control than I expected you to have, that's for sure, she pointed out with a smirk. Next one, and this time, instead of just standing there, She made a few quick hand seals and then spit out a poison cloud that quickly covered the entire clearing. Ha, poison resistance training on the side, I guess I thought as I went through the same hand seals as before. Once I was in control of the wires again, I made them extend in all directions around me. With that done, I let them fall and went through a new series of seals. Once I was done, I groaned as a pain shot through my head as if someone had taken a kunai straight to my brain. I took a deep breath in and closed my eyes. Keep calm, just feel, I told myself in my mind. The pain didn't go away, but I was able to push it aside enough to focus on what was important. The information I was receiving. Anko was now standing behind me. Kat was standing right where she had been before, apparently uncaring of the poison. And don't even try, I threatened, and the snake that had been slithering her way towards me froze right where it had been on my right. A second later, a smile almost split my face in half. Still, I sighed and let the jutsu go. Again, I pushed the new blue screen to the side with the others. Another success, it seems, Anko said as Kat used a wind jutsu to push the poison cloud away from us. It was, although the sensing really made a number on my brain, I groaned. Gotta get used to it, I guess. She hummed, looking at me with an analytical eye. Continue with your break. Maybe we can get some more practice afterwards. If that headache keeps up, we might have to give up on that jutsu. I nodded before making my way to the tree I had been at previously and sitting against it. Picking up the book, I mentally pulled the screens from before so that they floated in front of the pages. It took an Herculean effort not to grin like a lunatic. The first screen was the most important though. Quest complete, create a functional jutsu. Reward. Plus stage of chakra control. Plus perk, jutsu creator. This is the greatest thing ever. I thought, ecstatic, fighting to keep my emotions from my face. And here I was wondering how I would get more chakra control. Chakra control, B+. Now I just need to find some other ways, 2 more and I'll be sitting in a pretty neater, I thought, somewhat giddily. And let's not forget about the perk. Jutsu Creator. Improves the rate at which personally created jutsu level up by 30%. Increases the efficiency of personally created jutsu by 15%. Improves the rate at which all jutsu level up by 20%. Increases the efficiency of all jutsu by 10%. Game. I take back all the complaints I made when I arrived about you not being all that I thought in or. Now, if that wasn't awesome, I didn't know what was. If I put enough effort into it, there was no way I wouldn't be able to max both jutsu. As for the jutsu themselves, I dismissed the screens telling me that I unlocked them, and instead pulled the fell descriptions. Living Thread Technique LVL1. E-rank technique with which the user can control ninja wire at will. Hand seals 4. Consumption 10 chakra points every second. Plus creator bonus. Increases thread speed by 25%. Increases thread maneuverability by 25%. I get a creator bonus. I wondered, my hands twitching as I yearned to use the techniques again. And those bonuses were nothing to scoff at. A 10% extra would have been nice. But a 25% in speed and maneuverability. That was just plain awesome, as Naruto would say. Web Sense Technique LVL1. D-rank technique with which the user can sense through a ninja wire that connects to them. Hand seals 5. Range 1 meter. Consumption 20 chakra points every second. plus creator bonus. Increases range by 50%. The bonus combined in just one thing, huh? I noted this time, the initial surprise wearing off but certainly not the joy. This was great news from all places. Also, the remaining training maniac in me was happy that my reduced training time wouldn't affect me too much with the previous perk. I tried not to listen too much to it though. I was very happy with my day, that was for sure. 2 months later. It was halfway through my training time until the exams that something stood out from the routine I had now. It had been, despite the worrying prospect of the future, a rather peaceful time all things considered. I had been just training, slightly less than before, and relaxing, with my new hobbies of reading and free running until I found a good view to draw. I had grown fond of my time alone for either activity. And I had also taken the habit of giving my finished drawing to my friends, which was also very nice. There was just something about how happy they were when I did it, and how fulfilling it felt to do something that had nothing to do with fighting and yet still felt worth it, despite the world we lived in. It also helped that my friends had a bit more free time around that time. Since everyone had stopped doing C ranks to focus on training for the exams. I still went to do things by myself, but I enjoyed time with my friends more, even if I was trying not to make that time all about them. Furthermore, my training didn't suffer as much as I had feared. All my skills were growing at a steady rate, especially my jutsu now that I had the jutsu creator perk. My personal techniques were sure to be maxed by the time the exams came around. Electromagnetic murder and fireball, not so much, but if I managed to be done with web sense and living thread, then maybe I could spend some more time with those and get them ready. Minor mirage and healing palm were also all but guaranteed to be done by that time, even if they weren't such a priority. The former more than the latter, since it would expand my capacity for deception even further. But all that, as I said before, was part of the routine. And what managed to break through that was something that I had been wondering about. New Ivory Mastery has gone up a level. New Ivory Mastery LVL10 increases the skill of the user when fighting with New Ivory according to level. Increases damage done with New Ivory by 50%. Increases accuracy when throwing New Ivory by 50%. Increases chakra flow effectiveness and efficiency by 50% when used on New Ivory. Increases physical stats when using New Ivory by 10%. It had been a normal day of sparring against Cat, who I had been seeing a lot more lately. The higher-ups most likely really wanted me to learn how to use it as effectively as possible. Not surprising, really. What had really surprised me was that I was even allowed to keep the sword and not give it to some Chunin or something. My best theory was that Konoha's leaders didn't want to insult Kiri's traditions, now that we were trying to gain their alliance. Regardless of all that, what followed that level was the important part. New title acquired, Wielder of New Ivory. I thought as I blinked, surprised and at the same time not. I thought it was weird that I didn't get anything when Zabuza said the sword was mine. Guess I wasn't skilled enough to count for that. With that said, guess I'll come back to this after training is over, I thought, blocking one of Cat's slashes. Eventually, I was free to look at the new title. Wielder of New Ivory. Increases stats when wielding New Ivory by 30%. Simple and to the point. I'm used. Pretty nice for when Genin of Konoha or Shadow of the Shinobi don't work, or to use together with those was my first thought when looking at it. I was certainly happy with it, that much was true. 3 months later. So, Can you repeat why I'm meeting my team a week before the exams? I asked, irritation clear in my voice. And really, who could blame me? The exams depended heavily in all the team doing at least moderately well, or so I remembered at least. Things like nobody failing the first part or the whole team was out and such. The only individual part was the third and the preliminaries. Well, we were honestly hoping that someone from your friends' teams would choose not to participate, Anko answered, clearly as annoyed as I was. There were high chances of either the Pinkhead or the Hyuga to choose not to, actually. Sakura and Hinata. I could see it. More Sakura than Hinata, really. If our shy friend was the same as she had been before she started hanging out with us, it would have been a given that she wouldn't do it. But now, with some help with her confidence, she totally would give it a shot. Hirano, though, hadn't had much of a chance to improve. She had joined at the very end, and that may have had a detrimental effect, actually. Hanging out with the group once we were all very much ahead of her might have taken a toll on her self-esteem. And with the group growing slightly divided after graduation, that didn't help her improve much. Thus, I was glad that she had chosen to participate. It reassured me that at least the change hadn't affected her as much as I had feared. That was something, at least. So, who are they anyway? I asked with a sigh. Well, I wouldn't want to ruin the surprise, Anko replied with a grin as I rolled my eyes. The first one is a prodigy of his field. It just so happens that said field doesn't help much with this type of exams. That and he's had very bad luck with his teams. Let's hope it's actually that and he's not just bad with pressure, I commented idly. Shouldn't be doing what he does, my sensei reassured. The other one isn't much of a team player, I'll admit now, that wasn't reassuring at all. His ability doesn't help with that, but he should be able to pull his weight. And with you and the other one, it's more than enough for it not to matter. Right, it isn't like I've been training my ass off to do extra well in this exam or anything, I quipped, receiving a smack on the back of my head. Kiddo, even with the added difficulty, you should be able to pass this exam with 2 first-year academy students as your team, honestly. I grinned at that. It was probably true. My smile vanished quickly though, because I knew things that nobody else did. Primarily, that Orochimaru had his ugly fingers all over these exams, and that spelled trouble for everyone involved. Let alone Gaara. As cool as the future Kazekage was, he was also a homicidal bastard at the start. And with the butterflies that I had set free during my time here, I couldn't put my hopes in a change of heart or a talk no jutsu. That wasn't even taking into account this mysterious added difficulty that I had never gotten details on. So, are they gonna come today? I asked with a raised eyebrow. Because we had been sitting at the training grounds where I was supposed to meet my teammates for around 15 minutes, and my confidence in these guys became smaller by the minute. Couldn't they be on time at least? Sorry for the delay, a voice said from the side, and I turned my head to look at the new arrivals. You've got to be kidding me, I thought in disbelief. So, you are Ig Sata? The one walking slightly in front asked with a smile. We are your teammates for the Chunin exams. That's Yoroi Kadu, he introduced, signaling the teenager walking behind him before extending a hand towards me, and I'm Kabuto Yakushi. Pleased to meet you. So, yeah, it was official. Kabuto and the extra guy were my teammates. I'm not sure if it showed on my face. I had become quite good at hiding my emotions when I wanted to, but I wouldn't be surprised if something slipped through. If it did, nobody said anything, and we did the whole introduction while we explained to each other what we could do. I had experienced a lot of surreal moments in my life after, well, coming back to life, which is why I was always kind of surprised that I could still be hit with new ways to feel like that. Learning that I would participate in the Chunin exams with Kabuto, aka Orochimaru's agent at my side, was one such moment. This complicates matters, I thought to myself after I was able to get away from them, and Anko really complicates matters, and also tells me that I might have taken the snake's attention from Sasuke. At that point though, I couldn't quite bring myself to care about changes to the plot anymore. After all, I was seeing more things different than I was seeing things stay the same. Clinging to my folk knowledge and expecting it to remain just as valuable was a fool's errand, and I had known it from the very beginning. It was time to use it solely to know what someone's abilities could be and maybe their motivations. But the plot itself had gone out the window a while ago. So, with the next mess in sight, I sat in my bedroom looking over my changed status and skill screens. IG Sata. Main title, Anko Mitarashi's Apprentice. Secondary title, Prodigy. Energy points, 900/900. Chakra points, 675/675. Strength, 45. Dexterity, 49. Constitution, 45. Chakra, 45. Chakra control, B+. It was beautiful, or at least it was to me. I was especially proud of dexterity, to be honest. And despite what one might think, it had nothing to do with being able to reach incredible levels of speed. No, I actually quite liked it because it was the stat that I used the most when I was free running around the village. Some would call it an unimportant reason, but I had grown fond of the things that didn't hold any grand motive behind. The little things and all that. With a small, satisfied smile, I continued on to the skills. Physical resistance LVL20. Reduces the damage received by purely physical attacks by 20%. That skill wasn't maxed yet, but it was one that I was very proud of. It had been growing slowly. Especially since I didn't quite have a training exercise for it. It simply grew as time passed, through spars and the like. I still remembered when I got the skill. It hadn't been much. I hadn't even been noticeable. But now I definitely noticed. And since I had half expected it to max at 20 and leave it with just 20% decrease, I was more than happy to see that it could still grow further, like some other of my skills. It did bring up the question of why some skills could grow past 20 and some maxed even before that. But like some other things, it wasn't really worth thinking much about that. Some things about the system would remain a mystery, and I had accepted that. Poison crafting max. Improves the quality of poisons crafted by the user by 100%. Not the best of the skills that I had trained over the months, but it was certainly a mark to be noticed. Anko would still continue teaching me, and I had no problem with that, since I would sometimes get a new idea or such things. But regarding the process of making the poisons, I had all but mastered it. One could only hope that my sensei would notice and focus only on ingredients and recipes. Lightning release, electromagnetic murder max. C-rank technique with which the user creates a wave of electricity from their hands. Consumption 20 chakra points. The jutsu was great, and when it grew in level, it became even better, despite how the description barely changed. It was simply amazing, even if it was also a little unnerving, to be able to take out some of the biggest creatures of the Forest of Death with just one hit. Not that I got many chances to do that, since we went there only 2 times. Evidently, the place was being prepared for the exams, or maybe they wanted to give the animals a chance to repopulate after my training. Anyway. Yin release, minor mirage max. D-rank technique with which the user creates a small illusion for their target to see. Consumption 1 chakra points per illusion. Again, not the most impressive of my current skills, but certainly nothing to scoff at. And while it didn't sound like much better than basic mirage, it was certainly better than anyone would have expected. Genjutsu truly shined when used on the side of other techniques, making the latters that much more dangerous. Healing palm technique max. C-rank technique with which the user helps a target recover from wounds using their chakra through their hands. Consumption 1 chakra points per second. This skill, I was very glad I had maxed. Especially now that my supposed Meidnin teammate was Kabuto of all people. No way I was letting that bastard anywhere near my or anyone else's injuries, except maybe Yoroi. Body flicker technique max. D-rank technique with which the user can infuse chakra in their legs to travel long distances. Range 400 meters. Consumption 10 chakra points. Now, this. I was kind of indifferent about it, really. I left it exclusively for long distance travel and maybe if I was still in stealth mode. Otherwise, lightning flicker was a better option. Due to my affinity, it was slightly better than the normal one, after all. It still could be used to mess with someone, if I could get in a blind spot and then flicker somewhere else without them knowing that I did. That had led to a fun day, even if Anko had been very pissed off. Fire release, fireball max. D-rank technique with which the user launches a fireball at a target. Increased chances of the target continued burning by 30%. Consumption 10 chakra points. That was cool, I guessed. But I just wasn't as enthusiastic about it as I was with my lightning jutsu. Don't get me wrong, spitting out a fireball was about as cool as I would have ever been able to imagine, but it was still left as something to use as backup to my lightning ones instead of a main technique. Intermediate Kenjutsu, active, LVL 16. Increases the skill of the user when fighting with a sword according to skill level. Active effect increases the user's physical stats by 8. Active effect consumption 34 energy points per second. It was a shame that I didn't get it maxed and unlock advanced Kenjutsu, but I would get there someday. Its slow progress made some sense though. After all, it seemed to apply both to New Ivory and to any sword. Which was nice. I was sure that I would be very grateful if I ever needed to use my Tanto instead of New Ivory, for whatever reason. Despite its somewhat lacking progress, it was still a pretty solid buff in a pinch, even if it positively burned through my energy points. Especially if I used it together with intermediate Taijutsu, running and free running. On the plus side, I was also fast as fuck when using all of them, let alone the other buffs to my stats. Chakra flow, lightning max. Technique with which the user can channel elemental chakra into weapons to grant them special enhancements. Increases the cutting power of the weapons affected by 100%. Weapons have a 100% chance of causing numbness on contact. Consumption 1 chakra points per second. Now this is something that I can be proud about, I thought with a wide grin. It was probably the skill that I was the most happy to have maxed. I would even go as far as putting it next to lightning flicker. It was especially good since it didn't actually need the weapons to have a special kind of metal to be used, contrary to what I had expected. It wasn't as good as stunning thread, but it would come in handy if I ever needed to fight with just a kunai or my Tanto. And those weren't even the best uses for it. No, the best was reserved for New Ivory, naturally. After all, it synergized spectacularly well with the sewing needle. Not only did the legendary sword's skill have something to boost the effects of this particular technique, but it also benefited greatly from it regardless. The grinning man had said that it would make the thread of the blade unbreakable as long as chakra was channeled through it. We had tested it ourselves, and it was pretty unbreakable on its own though. It was, however, much better at conducting chakra than even the best weapons that either Anko or Kat had ever seen. We also had absolutely no idea how the thread gained an edge with chakra. And it worked that way for everyone, even those that had affinities that didn't have anything to do with that effect with chakra flow. We had checked. Although, I was relieved when I was told that the leaf wanted to respect the mist's tradition regarding the blade. I was also, however, told that people would most likely come to challenge me after the exams. The why was obvious. Someone, and by someone I mean Hiruzen and / or Danza, was helping me keep everyone away from me and my sword. For the moment, that is. I was happy with it, honestly. Having New Ivory for the whole mess that was coming had certainly helped me retain a semblance of calm. Back to the blade though, the sword itself was very good, yes. Its edge though, wasn't really all that, considering the thing's legendary status. The truly remarkable thing about the sword was the tip. New Ivory could pierce through anything if it had enough force behind it. The thing would certainly not break before going through, that was for sure. It was also laughably easy to do so with most things. And, on that note, my training with the blade had resulted in what I thought was a pretty decent improvement. New Ivory Mastery LVL 14. Increases the skill of the user when fighting with New Ivory according to level. Increases damage done with New Ivory by 70%. Increases accuracy when throwing New Ivory by 70%. Increases chakra flow effectiveness and efficiency by 70% when used on New Ivory. Increases physical stats when using New Ivory by 14%. Quite possibly the skill that I liked the most. Or, at least, it would be once I maxed it. I was sure that it would be the one to put lightning flicker and chakra flow in second place. It was just something so awesome, and it gave so many things, that it was difficult not to think like that. It also made, or would make, more like, chakra flow twice as good as it already was, which only added to it. Living Thread Technique Max. E-rank technique with which the user can control ninja wire at will. Consumption 1 chakra points every second. Plus creator bonus. Increases thread speed by 25%. Increases thread maneuverability by 25%. Maxing the techniques I had created had been predictably easy. Living Thread, in particular, had been an absolute godsend. The first time I set up a wire trap while sparring with Anko, her reaction was positively hilarious. It also helped me adapt already set traps in case the situation changed, which was equally good, really. Furthermore, I could now apply the threads much more effectively in actual combat too. There were positive things however you looked at it, really. Web Sense Technique Max. D-rank technique with which the user can sense through a ninja wire that connects to them. Range 20 meters. Consumption 1 chakra points every second. Plus creator bonus. Increases range by 50%. And last, but not least, my currently only technique to locate enemies without my eyes. Getting used to having an entirely new sense to be aware of was a chore, I'll admit. The amount of time I spent having skull-splitting headaches was not small, let me tell you. However, it was well worth it. Now, there was no way that simple mist or smoke or poison would block my awareness of my enemy. Sure, I would have wanted something even better. Something on the level of Sage Mode sensing skills, but that was well out of my league. For now, at least. Overall, I thought to myself after going over my screens. I'm still not sure how prepared I am for this shit show. I could only grimace as I leaned back on my chair. Anything to say? I asked to the air in the room, smirking wryly as I saw a piece of paper appear in front of me. Good luck, it read. Yeah, I'll need it, I couldn't help but answer in my mind. Oh. So, what do you think? Yoroi asked, raising an eyebrow at the honestly very lame genjutsu put over the false room where the exam would supposedly be held. Even if I hadn't known it had happened like that, I could tell shit like that without even thinking. Having Chunin as an occasional training partner would do that to someone. That woman casted genjutsu as easy as breathing, and she liked to put them on people just to see if they noticed, even when not training. It was a curious habit of hers. Let's go for the real room, okay? I asked with a shake of my head, getting a simple nod from my teammates. With that said, the three of us walked towards the stairs. I had debated with myself about going to the exams with my friends. But since every team gathered separately, and since I didn't want to expose any of them to my teammates' attention more than it was strictly necessary, well, I decided to just be alone with those two, unnerving as that was. And, as a side bonus, if I wasn't there, maybe some of them wouldn't pass the genjutsu mini test. Was it mean of me to wish for them not to pass the exams? Maybe. But there was just so much that could go wrong here, especially with how changed the plot was, that I didn't want to risk it. Maybe I was a terrible brother and friend for wanting to ruin their chances of being Chunin now. But I could live with it, and they could become Chunin later on. My thoughts then trailed off together with my eyes towards my two teammates. My mind flashed back to all my theories as for why they had been placed as my teammates. There was a small, very small, chance that it was just a very unfortunate coincidence. After all, Anko's information was accurate, even if I knew it was false. Their files said that they were good teammates to have. However, I didn't buy that for a second. If it was the case, then I would be a very relieved person. But until I could prove that, I would assume that this was Orochimaru's doing. What the snake bastard wanted from me, I didn't know. Or maybe it's more accurate to say that I wasn't sure. Maybe I was to take Sasuke's place in his plan for immortality. Maybe the madman just wanted to study me. It could be just about anything, knowing Orochimaru. The point is, I thought before trailing off as the Kabuto opened the door to the classroom where the first stage of the exams would be held. Why did I stop? Well, there were some extra characters around. Why am I even surprised anymore? Wow, the Leaf is having babies take the exams now. Someone asked mockingly, his eyes fixed on me. Several people joined with chuckles at that. Normally, I would have let it slide. But I was in a bad mood and I was nervous. I had snaky spies on both sides. So, I might have been slightly snappy. And thus, I simply turned to him with lazy eyes and bloodlust. The atmosphere changed instantly as every single participant tensed up. All cheer quickly disappeared. Wow, the Sand is having idiots take the exams now. I asked back with my most fake smirk as I eyed Kankuro. Pre-change Suna siblings are something I amused to myself. Tamrai looked torn between smacking her forehead or her brother's. Kankuro's eyebrow twitched in annoyance. And Gaara. And hypocrites too, I added, although my tone grew slightly serious as I locked my eyes with the Jinchuriki of the One Tail. I hope you can change just like in canon, Gaara, I thought. And that you do so. Because I won't hesitate to deal with you if you become a danger to me and mine. Deactivating bloodlust, I walked up to an empty space on the desks and took a seat. As I did so, my mind went over all the people that I had seen in the room. Those that should and those that shouldn't be there. Kurotsuchi of Iwagakure. I had almost missed her being there. Since I didn't expect her to be there, and thus, I hadn't read on her through my notebooks. Regardless, the appearance of several ninja from the land of Earth had been enough of a hint, making my mind remember what it could. I noted that there must have been at least 3 teams from Iwa, Karue and Ome of Kumogakure. Those were the 2 I could recognize, at least. There were less people from the land of lightning than from the land of Earth though, I noticed. Their appearance, amusingly enough, made it so that the last group was less of a shock, really. Haku and Chaojura from Kirigakure. Together with them was a 3rd member. The 3 of them seemed to be the only team that the Land of Water had sent, although that didn't work as much of a reassurance. I knew of 2 of their members, and although Chaojura didn't seem to have Hiramekaya, that didn't mean much considering that I wasn't keeping New Ibury outside either. He could still have it in a seal somewhere, just like me. Haku, for his part, was a force to be reckoned with, and the 3rd guy, even if I didn't recognize him, must have been something too, to be thrown in a team with the other 2. Now all those warnings about this exam being harder make sense, I thought to myself. This is going to be more of a mess than I thought it would be. Oh. Kurotsuchi Povi. This is going to be more of a mess than I thought it would be, I couldn't help but think as I eyed the new arrival to the room. A complete mystery. God, how I hated mysteries. All groups had received files on everyone that was of notice. From Konoha, at least. There were many clan heirs that would participate in the event. The most notorious of which was the last Uchiha in the Leaf. But even then, they weren't the only ones to look out for. There's the fucking Kyuubi container too. If the Leaf thought they were doing a good job at keeping the blonde Jinchuriki a secret, they were delusional. Something that my grandfather thought was entirely possible. Although, considering the bias that Iwa had towards Konoha, maybe I should take it with a grain of salt. In this particular case, it seemed they held some truth. It hadn't been difficult to tell who it was, considering how the whole village seemed to shun the blonde boy. And the fact that the whole group from the land of Earth had noticed from day one should be a testament to how obvious they were. But we had info on everyone's notice, or so we thought. We had been fairly confident on their way there. Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki were the only ones to truly look out for. The rest of the heirs had a degree of skill too, but those stood up. After all, someone that could copy any jutsu that wasn't a bloodline limit and place a genjutsu on you with just a gaze was someone to look out for. Not to mention how talented he seemed to be, according to our information. And right beside him stood the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, who seemed to be fairly skilled with Fuinjutsu of all things. And that information added to how we now finally had a face to the boy. It had scary implications, to say the least. And now, we have an unknown threat, I grumbled to myself, eyeing the black-haired red-eyed menace that had just waltzed inside the room. The Iwa Shinobi had information on pretty much everyone worth knowing. So, how was it that we didn't have information on this guy? I hadn't felt so much killing intent since. A shudder traveled down my spine. This wasn't going to be easy at all, despite what everyone boasted. But we had our orders. My eyes went back to the door as it opened again. A corner of my mind worried that there would be more unknowns. Fortunately, it was just the already expected clan heirs and the Jinchuriki. And it was a testament to how I felt that I was relieved to see such a group of people walk in. That guy was there was something very dangerous about him, I just knew. A smaller amount of killing intent washed over the room once more, and I saw more than one pair of eyes dart towards the unknown. His red eyes, though, were blatantly focused on the eldest son of the current Kazekage. I could almost imagine his words say something, "I dare you," coming out of his mouth with that mocking tone he had used before. Maybe it was a small betrayal to my village's hate of everything Leaf-related, but I was quite amused as I saw the other boy sweating bullets under the unknown's glare. It was small though, since I could completely understand why he would be nervous. I was too, and I wasn't even the one that had messed with that guy. "Better steer clear of that one," I muttered under my breath, just loud enough for my teammates to hear. Both nodded their agreement. Nobody normal could have that strong a killing intent. If anyone wanted to take out their hate against Konoha, better do it with anyone but that guy. Oh. Whoopov. So, that's him, I thought, eyeing Ig Sata. There was very little that Kumo knew of him. But the sole fact that Konoha seemed more concerned about hiding his presence over their Jinchurikis spoke volumes. We didn't know what he could do, nor even any of his strengths or weaknesses. There was only one thing we knew, and it was enough for the Raikage to tell us to keep an eye on him. He had participated in the retrieval of 2 of the 7 swords of the mist. And that meant a whole lot of things in itself. First, that the Leaf trusted him with such a duty. Second, that he could survive such a mission. And third, and most important of all, that he could, maybe, carry one of the blades with him. Kumo was very much aware of the traditions Kirigakyo held regarding their legendary weapons. And despite the fact that they might have made an exception about leaving one of them in the hands of a foreigner, especially with the civil war still going on back then, they would certainly follow it if it was to return a bit of the goodwill that the Leaf had shown them. They might not even challenge the guy too soon, what with the side the Leaf chose winning. Still, this was all speculation at best. There was more than a fair chance that the Sata hadn't gotten a sword. After all, what were the chances of a genin beating a jounin, low-ranked or high-ranked? Regardless of that, everyone had been given a file on him, empty as it was. It was more of a symbolism, really. A message saying be careful with this one. And wasn't that a pain? Almost all of the Konoha shinobi were worth notice. Not to mention that show he had put up just after arriving. I didn't envy the Suna guy's position. I wouldn't have wanted to be on the receiving end of that red-eyed glare. With a sigh, I tried to relax a bit and closed my eyes. Hopefully, nothing will happen, I tried to reassure myself. Then, I opened my eyes again and was, once more, aware of the atmosphere inside the room. Yeah, right, I thought bitterly with a wry smile. That's it, Sky, for now. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching.